Good morning, everyone. It's been a difficult day in Afghanistan, in Kabul. We've had another terrorist attack targeting the Hazara community again. This may disrupt some of our participants or some of the attendees joining us, so we apologize for that. My name is Susan Tamasebi. I am the director of Femina. Femina is an organization that works to support women human rights defenders, their organizations, and progressive feminist movements in the broader MENA region. It includes Middle East, North Africa, and several countries in Asia, including Afghanistan. We've been working on Afghanistan for some time now, and especially stepped up our programming before the withdrawal of US troops in the fall of Afghanistan, when women human rights defenders were especially being targeted for terrorist attacks and for killings. We tried to bring attention to that, and we've been working on Afghanistan pretty intensively since then to try to elevate the voice of women human rights defenders. We're very pleased today to have a stellar panel with us, including 4 Afghan activists, 2 special rapporteurs, and an amazing moderator, Azadeh Raz Mohammed, who you will hear from, and I'm sure you'll agree with me that she is amazing. This event is part of a series of efforts that Femina, along with Freedom Now, and hopefully with the support of AWID, all 3 of us, our 3 organizations are sponsoring this event. We are going to be working to bring attention to the needs and challenges faced by this emerging civil society, grassroots civil society inside of Afghanistan. Most of these organizations are new. They're operating in the form of initiatives, so they have serious needs in terms of needing support structurally to develop, to make sure that they have impact, but also given the incredibly closed context in Afghanistan, they are also very well positioned to be doing the work that they're doing, because as you know, formal organizations have left Afghanistan, but it would also be very difficult for them to operate. So I hope that this session really highlights both the challenges, but the relative strength of all these initiatives to be working in the current context that they're working in. We're going to start with 3 panelists from inside Afghanistan. Hopefully all of them will be able to join us. First with Farah Mustafavi, who's already here. We'll be showing a video by Monisa, who's also here, but she's in Afghanistan. We pre-record her presentation, and then Shamayel Tawana. And we'll have Fatima Ahmadi, who is an activist in exile, and then Richard Bennett, the special rapporteur on Afghanistan. We're very pleased to have him with us. And last, Melissa Upertri, who is a human rights lawyer, and she's also the chair of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. And then we will open it up to question and answer. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Zobeida, who can give you some information about her organization and then some technical issues that she wants to address. Zobeida John?
Hello, everyone. Before we start, I want to pass my condolences to our participants from inside Afghanistan. Kabul witnessed a horrible attack today in a suicide bombing on an educational center in a predominantly Hazara community. Many children lost their lives. It's difficult to remain hopeful or discuss possibility of human rights work in a country where targeted attacks are taking the lives of Hazaras, and those who normalize suicide bombings in schools and places of worship are placed in charge of protecting the lives of people. Moving on to today's event, thank you for joining us. Welcome. I'm Zubaida Akbar. I lead the Afghanistan program of Freedom Now, an organization that works to protect individuals and communities from government repression and defends human rights through legal support, targeted high-leverage advocacy, and capacity building analysis and assistance. We are happy to partner with Femina and AWID in bringing this discussion on the status of grassroots civil society in Afghanistan to you. Before we start this session, I'm going to review a few technical instructions with you. Please note that today's event will be recorded. If you have any security concerns, please rename yourselves on Zoom before posting anything in the chat room. Please introduce yourself in the chat if you feel comfortable to do so. Finally, if you need any tech support during the session, please reach out to me or my colleague, Aida Sadat, in the chat. Now I would like to pass it on to Azada Raz Muhammad, who will be moderating the session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zubaida John and Susa John. It's indeed a pleasure to speak today and moderate this important session on the grassroots movement, civil movement in Afghanistan. I also wanted to express my condolences to everyone affected today in Afghanistan's heinous attack today. So I just wanted to, without further ado, I wanted to start the session. So the women-led grassroots civil society organizations were active throughout Afghanistan's protracted conflict of more than 4 decades during the former Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 and during the 1980s and 1990s. The Afghan women-led NGOs provided vital humanitarian assistance in the areas of health, education, income generation, skills training, literacy classes, and emergency relief. In the past 20 years, many of such organizations were also active in the areas of such as trauma counseling, rights awareness, promotion and protection of human rights, social reforms, peace building, and providing essential services to marginalized groups. Since the return to power on August 15 of 2021, Taliban have imposed restrictions on civic space in the country, including banning women from exercising their fundamental rights of freedom of expression and movement, right to education, work, and exercising their fundamental rights of civic participation. Despite Taliban's continued persecution and intimidation of civil society activists in the past 1 year, women-led grassroots civil society movements have formed and to retaliate and defy Taliban's oppressive policies. The formation of such grassroots civil society movements sends a clear message that Afghan women will not accept Taliban's regime's gender apartheid measures in Afghanistan. The presence of such movement is important in Afghanistan's stability and peace and future. Newly formed civil society organization operates in a challenging environment with no institutional, legal, or financial assistance. It is important to understand that most of these organizations are largely newly formed and lack formal structure, allowing them to operate in a flexible and agile manner in a current and oppressive context. The international community needs to understand the unique position of these groups in advocating for the women's right and support them in a creative and flexible ways to ensure sustainability and impact. To support the emergence of and sustainability of these women-led grassroots movements in such a pivotal point in Afghanistan's history, the international community should stand in solidarity with these movements by supporting them to safeguard not only the achievements of the past 20 years, but also to empower Afghan women to stand up for their rights, celebrate their courage, and amplify their message. As Susan John said in today's panel, we have extremely wonderful activists from inside Afghanistan, including 2 esteemed UN Special Rapporteurs on Human Rights and Women's Rights. As also mentioned by Zubaida John and Susan John, due to today's unfortunate attack, some of the panelists will actually speak through their statement and also video messages. I believe the first panelist whose statements will be read by Zubaida John will be Ms. Shamal Tawana. Ms. Tawana is currently assisting the victims of today's attack, and she's at the hospital and not able to answer and be present in today's panel. She's bravely assisting the victims of today's attack to identify the dear ones of the people who are affected. So I will pass to my colleague Zubaida John to read Ms. Tawana's statement today.
As you are aware, since August 2021, the political, economic, and human rights situation in Afghanistan has deteriorated. With the collapse of the Republic and the Taliban's dominance in Afghanistan, the country has entered a dark era. Human rights and women's rights under the Taliban's rule are severely denied. Free speech is considered a crime, girls' education is a crime, women are not allowed to work and are systematically excluded from any political, social, and economic participation. The civic space is shrinking day by day, free media has collapsed, and access to information has become impossible. Mysterious murders of human rights activists, women's rights defenders, and former military personnel is happening. A few days ago, a young woman was mysteriously murdered in Bamyan, and another family was murdered in Ghor province, but no one was held accountable. Any kind of civil opposition to this group is seen as rebellion against the regime, and civil and protest movements are heavily oppressed by the group. As I speak to you now, the Taliban have ordered the arrest of protesters who defended their basic rights such as education, work, and free speech. And the majority of women's rights defenders live in secret for fear of arrest and murder. Under such circumstances, thousands of brave and committed women and girls, including hundreds of women and girls from our movement, the Afghan Women's Movement for Justice and Freedom, have decided to stand up and resist the injustice and human rights abuses of the Taliban. A big part of the struggle is the narrative of the situation. When we found out that the domestic media is censored and does not properly cover the reality of women, including the demands of women protesters, we decided to create Farkhanda News Channel to give women and girls deprived of all human rights a voice. This media is trying to portray and document facts as well as publish timely information on human rights, especially women's rights in Afghanistan. To do so, we need the support of national and international friends, especially human rights organizations, to expand our network to defend our civil rights. On the other hand, with the fall of the system, majority of civil society organizations, NGOs, and human rights activists have either left the country or have been dismantled. With the large number of institutions and NGOs out of Afghanistan, we sought to fill this gap. We have registered an institute under the name of the National Institute for Safety and Survival with the aim of providing legal, educational, and economic advice for women. However, because it's a newly established institution and operates in the field of women, it does not meet the criteria of donor institutions who are hesitant to fund smaller women-led movements. International institutions should support newly established women's movements and strengthen them through small grants. International institutions should put in place easier criteria for funding. So far, we have taken this difficult path and established our organizations. It's hard for us to sustain and expand unless we have large scale of support. Your material and spiritual support can fulfill our short, medium, and long-term goals, both in the field of civil struggle, providing relief support, and media activities. With your support, we can fulfill our responsibility for Afghanistan progress. With your support, we can fulfill our responsibility for Afghanistan's progress.
Thank you very much, Zubaydah Jan. That was another important message from Ms. Shamail Tawana, who has established Rukhshana Media to be an independent voice for the Afghan women and also the civil movement that we have right now in Afghanistan.
Hello to everyone who can see me right now. The world is well aware that it has been a year since the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan. During this 1 year, the people of Afghanistan have experienced very difficult times. They have been through poverty, genocide, insecurity, violence, unemployment, compulsory hijab, erasure of women from all aspects of life, and much more. These are clear examples of the Taliban's crimes against the people of Afghanistan, specifically the women of Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan who are aware of what's going on in the country and know their rights very well started their protests against the Taliban's oppression on September 3, 2021. They have used every platform to raise their voices for justice and to keep the world informed of what's going on. Starting on September 3rd, many grassroots movements and groups led by women started their protests with the slogan of food, work, and freedom and stood against Taliban's oppression. Women took the streets to oppose a group that has taken everything from people. What we got from the Taliban in return was violence, bullets, intimidation, detention, and torture. The international community's response to all of this was silence or occasional tweets and statements with no real implications. There is no doubt that everywhere in the world change has come from within. The elements of change rise from within a society. The history of Afghanistan has proven that prescriptive solutions are not sustainable and not impactful. Unfortunately, repeatedly, the international community has imposed its demands and their solutions on the people of Afghanistan and has not acknowledged the will and agency of the people of Afghanistan in their own lives. We have experience of human rights organizations, women's organizations, and civil society movements in Afghanistan over the past 20 years. Many organizations were formed with the support of donors and international community and worked in Afghanistan for the past 20 years. However, their work was not informed by the realities of Afghanistan. They did not operate in collaboration with the people of Afghanistan and were not reflective of the challenges and the needs of the people of Afghanistan. And with one political turmoil, all of these organizations collapsed. None of the organizations that had financial and political support of the international community during the past 20 years are active and present in the country now. They struggle to have an impact on the current situation of Afghanistan. They do not have the resources required in the country to be able to operate meaningfully. Those who were able to speak up about the demands of the people became voices to demand justice for Afghanistan. During the past year were grassroots movements of women. Grassroots movements stood up against the Taliban and staged civic resistance against them without any financial and political support from the international community. We women's grassroots movements are left alone to stand against the terrorist group that the international community fought for 20 years and eventually gave up. We are standing against them with empty stomachs, no jobs, no income, and no support whatsoever. I want to remind the world that the only group that is standing for the values of democracy and equality right now in Afghanistan are grassroots women-led movements.
It was a rather powerful message from Ms. Monisa Mubaris, who couldn't be here today with us live due to security concerns. Now we will move to our next speaker, Ms. Farah Mustafawi, who's an activist.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I have an opportunity to participate in this meaningful discourse. I will switch my speech in English because all of people around this conference will know English because I have the speech in Persian, but I prefer to say in English.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, despite all the challenges and limitations that we have right now in Afghanistan. So we really appreciate your presence. I just wanted to ask you, how were the grassroots civil society movements formed after the August 15? And how, what are their goals and how do they differ in their operations and approach from the formal civil society sectors that were operating prior to the fall of Afghanistan? And how can the women movements internationally better support these emerging sectors to ensure that they are operating safely in a sustained manner, as to complement the message of Ms. Monisa Mubaris? Thank you very much.
Women groups in Afghanistan from the beginning to now, or to today, in the last few months, Ghani's authoritarian regime was completely collapsing, and the feeling that something was happening had caused a number of social activists to have significant doubts. The unconventional appointments of Ghani's government, the Doha peace talk, which was everything but negotiation, the appointment of the negotiation team based on the relations of the people in the power circle of Ghani, were a sequence of phenomena that made the status quo and commitment to change possible, at least to be ready. 2 days before the fall, a number of activist women forced to take a demonstration and stand against the situation and have regular meetings. On that day of the fall, better to say the dawn day of Afghanistan, I, with a number of my friends, witnessed the collapse of the situation in Kabul and had long walks in the city until dinner to encourage the women and girls to come out from their homes to show the faces of women for the Taliban to say, we are the main part of our society, I mean Afghanistan. The declaration by media from the Taliban, the terrible presence of the fighters who were filled with fire, the escape of the Americans, which was the machine gun fire and non-stop flights, the end of 20 years of sacrifice by Afghans, and the mistake of the Americans with the appointment of the elite foreigners such as Ghanis and Karzais were announced. On the second day, under the pretext of Pakistan direct aggression, we held a demonstration to gauge the pulse of the Taliban. As expected, the street demonstration was the best time to uncover the lies of this group. In the following days, the first government officials and non-governmental office did not allow women to attend their jobs, and again, the wave to lies by this groups, media, beginning under various reasons. Women's demonstrations become more massive with the gathering of more female employees who lost their jobs, which aggravated the group even more. During these days, the meetings of women's group increased, and kind of coherence was formed between the small groups, which made the demonstrations more organized and resulted to homogeneous stand in different places of Afghanistan, especially in Kabul. In the days when those close to the ruling apparatus of the republic were bitterly waiting to escape at the gate of Kabul airport, including the women from negotiation team, the Afghan woman, the real Afghan woman, was in the forefront of shaping the women movements in order to not allow exclusion of women from the social life. Today, the brave ones who raised their voices showed the world that Afghan women stood alone against the worst and the most brutal terrorist group in the world, and structured the first civil struggle against operation. For the first time, without a project or proposal, the women showed that they are standing on their own feet. What we have achieved so far. Today, the ilaha can be hide inside the created structure, following to say no against Taliban, who started kidnapping and raping Afghan girls. Today, the women have got the courage to stand against any type of operation and voice up, causing global reaction. Today, Afghan women are the group who stands against Taliban, which clear identity of Afghan women who fight for their rights. In informal sector, the question is always raised that Afghanistan is no longer important and may be forgotten from the top of the news, from the social presence and the global media and Western countries. My end call. Human rights organizations, women rights activists, I hereby call you to stand with Afghanistan women, put pressure on male-centered politics to make decision and stop genocide in Afghanistan. Terrorists cannot be accepted under any brand, if Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or Daesh, all are the same. Any lobby group from state to individuals must stop, and international lawmakers should recognize Taliban as terroristic group. Lobbying for them must be recognized as crime against humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mustafawi, for such a yet another powerful message from Afghanistan, despite the limitation and security concern that we have, and this horrible, horrible day that yet another day we're witnessing such an attack on the innocent civilians. Thank you so much for speaking with us, and thank you so much for such a powerful message. With all the messages coming from Afghanistan, the three panelists who risked their lives to fight for civil participation and also women's rights and human rights in Afghanistan. Now I wanted to address my questions to our esteemed colleague and Mr. Richard Bennett, the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, to ask whether, having heard from these civil society leaders, how do you evaluate the support of international community to the human rights movement and civil society and media in Afghanistan, and how can be done differently, perhaps in a better manner?
Assalamu alaikum, Azada. Thank you, and greetings to friends. I'm really honored to be on this panel with such amazing, courageous, powerful Afghan women activists, and also my wonderful colleague, Melissa Upreti. Congratulations to Freedom Now, Femina, and AWID for organizing today's event. Before I move to your question, and I will answer it, I want to recall just again today's horrific attack on the Kaj Academy. It's the second time, previously 2018. It's carnage, it's a tragedy. And I do condemn, and I do send condolences but it's not enough. This should be front page news in every international media outlet. Is it? The Human Rights Council is meeting today. It should stop in its tracks. Will it? Hazaras have been targeted for years and continue to be targeted. The previous government failed to protect them. The Taliban is failing to protect them. The international community is failing to protect them. Students are not targets. And ethnic and religious hatred is a crime. I'll move to the question now. It's been once again a real privilege. I'm humbled by listening to members of civil society from Afghanistan, to women. I salute you for your strength, your courage, your tenacity, and your heroism. And I'm honored to stand in solidarity with you. I know that you are Afghanistan's leaders fighting for human rights. And you're leading the peaceful resistance against the Taliban, who have descended into authoritarianism, and some would say totalitarianism. I was really affected by what you have said, and I really hear and agree with the message that change comes from within, and that those in the international community need to provide support and need to listen and need to act according to your needs. So in response to the question, how do I evaluate the support of the international community? It's been insufficient. Much, much more has to be done. And I'll touch just on two areas, one very briefly, and then I'll come to one in a bit more detail, if I may. Accountability. It's been mentioned several times today. Without accountability, there will be impunity. And impunity will mean that there will be no peace, no stability. There must be processes so that those who violate human rights, who commit crimes, know that they may be brought to justice. If not tomorrow, someday in the future. And that can have a preventive effect, as we've seen in other countries. But today, I want to refer more to a more kind of practical issue. And in my recent report to the current session of the Human Rights Council, I did make one recommendation that touches on the question of today's discussion and the one that you've asked me. And I'll just read out this recommendation, not long. I said to the international community and member states that they should make all efforts necessary to protect human rights defenders and to strengthen the capacity of civil society organizations to protect and promote human rights, including through political support and by providing flexible and accessible funding arrangements to those inside and outside Afghanistan, especially women-led organizations, end quote. I think even with the best will in the world, donors are not well equipped to address the current situation in Afghanistan. And I'm willing to stand corrected, and hopefully there are donors listening in to this event today, and please take me on if I'm wrong. I think donors tend to want to give large amounts to large organizations to reduce their own administrative costs. And this is not working. Donors need to develop much more flexible and accessible funding arrangements. I hope they're doing this already. And if not, they should consult with Afghan grassroots organizations, listen to them, and design systems that take full account of their needs. What can I do? I've addressed the Human Rights Council this month. And next month, I will speak at the General Assembly. And I undertake to lend my voice to what you recommend. I also think that perhaps it could be useful to bring together donors and Afghan civil society organizations, especially women-led ones, to work out an agreed system that cuts through a load of bureaucracy. I know that's easier said than done, but I look to donors for leadership and I offer my support. I'm willing to attend such a meeting. And if you want me to, I'll convene the meeting. I'm at your service. Actually, that's not correct. I'm not at donors' service. I'm at the service of Afghans, and especially its strong women leaders. So I think that's really all I wanted to say today, because today it's more important that we listen to you and we take forward what you ask us to do. Once again, thank you for the honor of standing with you, and thank you for the trust that you've been showing in me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. It's indeed a pleasure to have you with us, and we are delighted to hear from you the crucial message that you had and the tireless work that you are doing for Afghans and Afghan people. You are currently the voice of Afghanistan, the voice of the voiceless and the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable people in the world right now. So we really appreciate your work. Thank you so much for speaking with us today and the important message that you had for us yet again. Now we're turning to our final speaker, panelist, Ms. Melissa Opridi, a human rights lawyer and a feminist nurturer, chair rapporteur of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. Ms. Opridi, I wanted to ask you whether what the role do you see of for the UN in supporting and uplifting the grassroots movements and civil society movements in Afghanistan, and how that role has been fulfilled. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me clearly. I would like to start by saying greetings, salam alaikum to all of you, and also to express my deepest solidarity with all of you, and also condolences for today's heinous act. We have been, as the working group, we've been following the situation in Afghanistan through various interlocutors and by hearing directly from Afghan women themselves. And what we've been witnessing since last August, which has already been described by many of the speakers today, is really the most brutal demonstration of institutionalized, systematic, and patriarchal oppression of women, using religious doctrine and raw power as a political tool. Now, international law does not permit the use of religious doctrine as a basis for discriminating against women and girls. Freedom of religion and belief must be practiced by individuals in a way that does not impinge upon the basic human rights of others, which includes a full range of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. The human rights implications of the political misuse of religion to subjugate women and girls is a profound concern for the working group, given the nature and scope of our mandate. I would like to note that we have been reminded by female Islamic scholars and activists that in places where Islamic religious fundamentalism manifests in this manner, quote unquote, traditional conceptions of male authority and guardianship and their presumed protective and empowering aspects have been turned on their heads and are being used to perpetuate male dominance and infantilize women. This is not true Islam. Limiting women's freedom of expression and movement negatively impacts every aspect of their lives, including their ability to work, access essential health services, and to seek humanitarian aid. As we have heard today, and as we have observed over the months, what we are seeing in Afghanistan is crisis upon crisis being imposed on Afghan women and girls to keep them in a perpetual state of subordination with complete disregard for their human rights. It really aims to crush their spirit. We are also alarmed by reports of the steady increase in discriminatory and violent practices against women and girls, as well as, for instance, the cruelty of victims of domestic violence being told that they will be taken to shelters only to be taken to prison, where they are subjected to further violence and torture, and as a consequence, stigmatized for life. By failing to protect Afghan women and girls from such horrifying abuse and expressions of patriarchal violence, we are failing to protect the international legal system. The use of religious fundamentalism as a political tool whereby women and girls are being specifically targeted, for example, through the imposition of dress codes, restrictions on their mobility, and threats of violence, is not limited to Afghanistan alone. If we want to stop the dangerous spread of these trends, we must find a way to stop it in Afghanistan. We have on many different occasions, we used our voice as a mandate to express our deep concern about the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan. Last September, we issued a strong call for women's equal political participation in the scenario that unfolded following the takeover, and we denounced the dissolution of key institutions. Statements concerning girls' participation in sports, denial of girls' access to education, and violence against female journalists have followed, and this is something that we do in our role as a mandate. More recently, we have joined Richard, the Special Rapporteur in Afghanistan, to call on the de facto authorities to immediately reverse policies and directives that negatively impact women and girls, as well as to prioritize women's and girls' equal rights and opportunities in all areas of their lives. We are appalled by frequent reports of attacks against ordinary Afghan women, demanding equality and freedom, journalists, lawyers, human rights defenders, among others, and the methods that are being used to silence them. And many of you have talked about those methods today. Just yesterday, Afghan women who gathered peacefully to express support for mass protests in Iran following the killing of Mahsa Amini were forcibly dispersed. This is yet another example of how their freedom of expression is being assaulted, and they are being intentionally isolated from other movements. Today's attack is another terrible demonstration of violence. Now, despite these abuses, clearly, as we can tell from all of you and what you have done today, even by speaking out, Afghan women continue to show relentless courage and have not faltered in calling for their right to be heard and to not be erased. Now, indeed, the international community has a duty not to fail Afghan women and girls. And the United Nations indeed has a crucial role in supporting and elevating grassroots movements and civil society in Afghanistan while doing everything within its power to protect them from reprisals. Recently, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights brought Afghan women to the session of the Human Rights Council. More effort is needed to create a variety of platforms and safe spaces for Afghan women, especially at the grassroots, so that they can share their experiences, report violations, build solidarity, and make their voices heard in spaces where decisions are being made. Further, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights must strengthen its own capacity to monitor, document, and report on the human rights situation of women and girls, including those belonging to minorities and other disadvantaged groups, as well as to support and protect women human rights defenders and women-led human rights organizations. It must also strengthen its engagement with the de facto authorities to prevent violations of international law and make full use of the work of special procedures to compel them to retract all discriminatory measures and renounce their policy of gendered violence. As a mandate, the working group will continue to work closely with the Special Rapporteur in Afghanistan, Richard, since our efforts must be coordinated and streamlined to have maximum impact. The working group will continue to receive and safely transmit information from Afghan women, including women human rights defenders and grassroots movements regarding their concerns and aspirations. We will continue to issue statements to put pressure on the de facto authorities, as well as member states engaging with them, emphasizing their respective obligations under international law. We will continue to brief the High Commissioner and member states and have bilateral conversations with them to keep Afghan women's and girls' issues high on their agenda. We have repeatedly emphasized that the systematic oppression of women in Afghanistan is not merely one nation's problem, but an affront and a threat to women and girls everywhere. We will continue to use our voice to push for the reversal of all discriminatory measures imposed by the de facto authorities, because there cannot be peace or justice in Afghanistan without full respect for women's rights. Since the last few years, we have been engaging specifically with girls and young women activists to understand and highlight the challenges that they face in their activism, which include under-resourcing, informality, heightened threats of violence, also resistance from family members, and just not being taken seriously, in addition to some of the challenges that were highlighted earlier about the requirements of donors. In our latest thematic report to the Human Rights Council, we have made several recommendations to member states and also to the UN, which speak to many of the barriers that young girls and women are experiencing in their advocacy and activism, which are relevant to what is being experienced by women in Afghanistan. And this can be another area of focus and collaboration. As I close, I would like to share one final observation. We have been hearing more frequently the frustrated voices of Afghan women who are tired of being asked to speak publicly about the situation in Afghanistan, with little to no improvement in sight, because of which they are beginning to lose hope. As a mandate, we will continue to amplify their voices and use all the means at our disposal to give them reason to hope. I promise you that we will not let them be erased. We will not let you be erased. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Afridi, for such a reassuring and strong message that you had for us, for Afghan women. And we're also delighted to hear that there will be collaboration between your office and also the Office of Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Afghanistan, Mr. Bennett, and also the collaboration that you and recommendation that you will submit to the UN, and also the initiative that they will be taken and the measures that will be taken by the UN and in terms of delivering the message of the grassroots civil society movements to the procedures and also member states of the United Nations. So we're really glad and thankful for your remarks today, and thank you so much. My apologizes. We have a final speaker, Ms. Fatima Ahmadi, who is also an activist in exile. We will pose our question to Ms. Ahmadi and ask her about what the civil society movements in diaspora can do to support the work of the grassroots movements in Afghanistan. Ms. Ahmadi, I hope you can hear us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me for this very important discussion. I'm sending my condolences to the families who are affected today, and I personally understand this pain living in this situation because I have my siblings back in Afghanistan and going to Barchi for study. But every day when you get up and you need to check on your loved ones and you hear bad news, is horrible. It's really, you cannot control your life. I'm outside, but it's not a normal life for me. It's not a normal life for them. And it's for many Afghan families every day happening to them. I'm going to start saying, the new administration in Afghanistan, it's not only a repression government. It's a terrorist organization. And we need to emphasize in this point, we cannot make deal with a terrorist organization and transfer this organization to a government. They're killing, their mandate is killing, their mandate is suppression, their mandate is removing others who are against them, who are opposite of their ideas from the society. And it will happen when we going to do deals behind the scene with this organization, terrorist organization. It's very important to understand. And this situation in Afghanistan will not stay there, as you mentioned, Melissa. It will transfer to other countries. It will come to Europe. It will come to the US. So we need to do something right now and remove this cancer in Afghanistan. When the August 15 happened last year, many of this exodus happened, and many of civil society activists have left the country. And we thought civil spaces and civil activities will vanish forever. But women of Afghanistan, the very early on, they came out and they protested against the Taliban without any support. It's very important to understand it. They didn't have any support from inside, from outside. There were no media to share their stories. There were no government to support them, no army to help them, to protect them, nothing available there. And they were the only women came out to protest against this government. We call it government, administration, terrorist organization. They did it. So what we can do from outside, as a Afghan women activist in exile, in parallel to what Afghan women did in Afghanistan, we also continue doing advocacy outside. I remember when I get out from the military camp, when I received my document, I was like, okay, women in Afghanistan doing this courageous activities, they're going to the street. What is our role? Our role is obvious. We should elevate their voices. We should go to meetings today, using platforms available for us to emphasize on what they're doing and what they want is clear. We want equality for Afghan women. We want to have work. We want to have participation. And this is not something that other people from outside dictate on us or Afghan women inside. This is our right. And it's very important for the international community to ensure women's participation of these new organizations that established by the women in Afghanistan, because they identified the need. They know what is happening in their own society, and they know what is the issues. And they created organizations to address those issues. We need them to be included in decision making. We need them to be here, right? From the people that telling to people, we are activists, we are human rights defenders. So we should also practice it. We should also show to the world that we include them, we hear them, we take action. What they mentioned about financial need. This is really a crucial part of their work. They need financial support to continue. And when 20 years ago, when the organization created, woman-led organization created, or other organization, many of this financial support goes to trainings and mentorings. Why not these organizations? They are like new organizations in Afghanistan, and we need support to train them. We need capacity building. We need mentorship. What I do, I work with a small group of peace builders and nonviolent action movements actors. And what I do every day is mentoring. I do not have financial support for them, but I help them to understand how to do their work, how to, for example, create, proposals or applications or these kind of things. We need to train them and make them prepare for bigger jobs. They do a lot of activities that other people cannot, and they were not brave to do, but they did it. So this is our role to do, to support them. And part of it is understanding the support of feminist organization outside. We need to have organization with specific mandate that they have to support feminist movements. And these are feminist movements in Afghanistan that they are taking place to support, to emphasize on women's rights inside of the country. And the donors organization, they have a very complicated system. I've worked with them in their own capacity inside, and I know the system is very complicated, and for the new organizations to get into their system, they need network, and they need skills and knowledge of the system, which are all news to this new organization that women just creating in Afghanistan. I think to wrap up my recommendations, one thing is being their voice everywhere that we can, and just transferring their messages to the policymakers and organizations who are outside and can do something. It's preparing or creating financial system that we continue supporting organizations inside, and preparing them to apply for funds. Not just telling them, okay, this is our system, you should, adjust yourself with the system. We can train them, we can mentor them, and we can prepare them for receiving these funds. We should make it possible. And it's possible. It's not something that no one can do it. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And it was a very great privilege to hear from Mr. Richard Bennett and Miss Melissa and the rest of the Afghan women inside of the country. And these are challenges we have, and we need support from international community to continue our work inside and outside of the country.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fatima Ahmadi, for speaking with us today, and especially in this day that you have your family and your sibling inside the country. And then this incident, I know it's not easy for us, all of us in diaspora or in exile, when something happens back home and we cannot reach our dear ones. So I applaud your bravery to speak with us today with such calm voice, despite what's happening back home. So thank you very much, and thank you very much also for evaluating about providing us with that information about what's happening inside these women-led movements and grassroots movements in the country, and also your message and recommendation that we can be their voice, amplify their message, and also support them in terms of building their capacity, and also assist them with technical issues such as applying for funding and approaching donors. So thank you so much for your message and speaking with us today. Because we started 10 minutes late, we will run 10 minutes over time. And we have questions for a few of our panelists today, and we allow 2 minutes for each esteemed panelist to answer these questions. First of all, I wanted to address Ms. Monisa Mubarak, who is having her cameras off today due to security concern that she may have. So Ms. Mubarak, if you can hear me, your question is like, I'll first read the question in English and then I'll switch to Farsi for you. So the question is posed to Ms. Mubarak from our audience is that, what are the operational challenges your movement is facing as you try to continue your human rights work in Afghanistan? If you could list from 3 or 4 challenges. خانم مبارک، سوالی از شما شده که گفتن شما در اجرای برنامه‌های جنبشتان یا جنبش اصلی زنان مقتدر افغانستان با چی چالش‌های عملیاتی مواجه هستید، از مشکلات مالی گرفته تا امکانات تنظیم جلسات و برنامه‌ها؟
Thank you so much in the name of Allah, and I am really grateful, and I appreciate it from you to conduct this meaningful and very important meeting to talk about a civil society and especially activist problem in Afghanistan, and find a solution where how to support the women movement and women protesters in Afghanistan. And thanks from Richard Bennett for preparing a special report about human rights situation in Afghanistan. Yes, it is clear after the coming of Taliban in Afghanistan, the life situation, especially for women, completely changed, but negative change came in after the coming of Taliban. Day by day, the danger and limitation increasing against protesters and civil society activists in Afghanistan. First problem and very more important problem is security problem for protesters and activists in Afghanistan that they want to conduct it conduct a demonstration against the Taliban. Because the Taliban is very big and very dangerous for protesters and for our meeting and our section. The second is financial problem. For example, in this time, there is no organization and address to support activists and support especially the women activists in Afghanistan. All the donors leave Afghanistan, and also Afghanistan has a legal problem. For example, the government of Taliban didn't recognize by the countries, and recognition make a legal problem for making a good relation for the other countries. So because of this, we have problem. Lots of the countries and the donor, by considering of this problem, do not want to support do not want to have a good relation with government of Afghanistan. Because of that, they couldn't support the civil society in Afghanistan. And also, we do not have any political support to conduct it or to hold a good meeting. For example, when we want to hold or conduct in a closing environment, a protest in a closing environment, there is no hall, no restaurant, and no hotel allowed us to pay money. It means in rent a house or a hall to conduct our meeting. It is a very big problem, because they follow all the Taliban follow the protester, and also they send warning to the managers of all the hotels to do not allow any person to do any conference. It means conduct any conference and a meeting against the government of Taliban in Afghanistan. For example, even they sent warning from all the banks, from all the other addresses. It means work to exchange the money and like this. They sent warning for them to police report it every month, every week. For example, by the name of under the name of Monisa Mubarak or under the name of Farah Mustafa, who withdraw money from bank. For example, when we want to make a banner, there is no how to say outdoor, or there's no shop is ready to help us to prepare a banner for a demonstration for our protest. So it is very problem, and the limitation increasing day by day against activists in Afghanistan. For example, security problem. Right now, after the 13th of August, they follow me and they send a decree to arrest me. I go out from Kabul, and I have a hiding leave, and I can do my activity in a very normal. It is a very big problem. On the other hand, our activists has need to capacity building program, training program, for example, like technology, and for example, they have a problem in analyzing of political issue in the world, and how to it means They do not know how to defend from themselves when they face it with Taliban, when they face it with challenges, security. So we need support it in different fields, political field, economical field, and also we need to support it in capacity building field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mubaris, for your message today that you need several areas of support. For example, you are operating in an extremely insecure situation. The financial support is dire, and also that political and international solidarity is actually missing in for your movement, which are extremely crucial and important for a grassroots movement who are defying such a repressive regime like the Taliban. Thank you so much for your message and answering the question. Our next question is for Mr. Richard Bennett. The question is for you, sir, that you are well aware of the human rights situation and Taliban's constant attack on civic spaces. They are unwilling to engage meaningfully. How do you see the future of civil society in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Azada Raz, for the question. You know, I think the answer has already been provided, in part at least, by Munisa Mubaris, who already laid out the challenges that civil society, especially women, are facing, and their persistence in the face of those challenges. She talked about the difficulty of having a place to have a meeting, even to make a banner, technical issues, analytical issues, the threats she is facing. So I think that gives some idea of the challenges that are being faced, that others, including the international community, need to address. So I guess my answer again is to kind of systematize the issues, to put out in clear language, in clear documents and requests how the international community can help. I don't think the international community is so much aware of all the very many new organizations that have sprouted since August last year. And as I said before, the systems need to be more flexible. There's also, I think, an issue in that many donors, many diplomatic missions have moved from Afghanistan. They're not there on the ground. They're sitting in their capitals, or they're in Islamabad, or they're in Doha. And that is another challenge, is the ability to interact, to explain the situation, and to have them understand. Plus the fact that diplomats change almost every year. They go to another country, so they're not experienced. I know that, and many of the diplomats and donors who are now working on Afghanistan have never been to Afghanistan. They started this summer, and they never worked on Afghanistan before. So they need a lot of information and a lot of help, even more than it was before. I used to get frustrated. I used to work in UNAMA, and I used to be frustrated that every summer I'd get a new bunch of diplomats, or if they're lucky, they would stay 2 years. And they would have to be kind of briefed, or they won't like this word, educated, about the situation in Afghanistan. But now they're not even in Kabul. They're in other countries. So there are more barriers to bring this together. And I think also an understanding that women's resistance and leadership in Afghanistan is nothing new. It may have been reinvented because of the needs in the past 1 year, but I was fortunate enough to be involved almost 20 years in Afghanistan. And I know that going back in history about women's activism in Afghanistan, And I suspect I might know some of the mothers of the women activists now. And they were the ones that first taught me about the power and the courage and the ingenuity of Afghan women. So somehow this needs to be harnessed. Now, I haven't talked about the Taliban and the engagement with the Taliban. I will just finish on that because I think Melissa, in her statement, her fantastic statement, in my view, made very clear what the obligations are under international human rights law, especially for women. And the Taliban have said, they said to me that they recognize that it's the state of Afghanistan that ratified the international human rights treaties, not any particular government. So this is where I think they need to be held to account and they need to be engaged with. It's important that the spotlight keeps being shone on Afghanistan. I'm hopeful that from now on, thanks especially to the efforts of Afghan women in the last two sessions of the Human Rights Council at the urgent debate and at the enhanced interactive dialogue, that there will be a spot for Afghanistan at every Human Rights Council meeting. That I think it's a small step, but important, because it gives a chance for Afghans, and especially women, to talk directly to those policy makers. And there needs to be many, many more steps as well, not least in New York at the Security Council and at the General Assembly. And we need to harness all the mechanisms of the UN. We talked about special procedures. We're about special procedures, but there are others. There are treaty bodies. There's the Office of the High Commissioner and the Voice of the High Commissioner, which Melissa referred to. And there's also UNAMA, which has a strong human rights mandate. It's one of the main things that UNAMA is mandated to do by the Security Council. So we need to support UNAMA, strengthen UNAMA, and work with them as well. So I'm looking forward to cooperating more with Melissa and her team and other special procedures, and also with UNAMA to see if we in the UN system can do more to keep open civil society space, especially women. I often, when one goes back to the UN Charter, and I'm going by memory now, it starts off by talking we the people. It doesn't say we the governments. And that's where I think we need to keep coming back to. We may be mandated by member states like Melissa is and I am, but I think we are accountable to the people, to you, in my case, to you in Afghanistan, I think in Melissa's to the world, but to the women of the world. But that, I think, should be our approach, that you are our priority. And as I said, please guide me, and I will do my best to speak. I'm not speaking on your behalf. I want to amplify your voices. And also to get practical. Like I said, if there needs to be a conference, if there needs to be a round table to bring the issues in front of the people who can help you, if it's money or political support you need, then I'm willing to help. So can we keep discussing that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bennett, for such a wonderful remark. And we completely agree that the context of Afghanistan is extremely complex, and these diplomats rotation has been a problem in the past 20 years as well. And we are so grateful and delighted to have you as a special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Afghanistan, who has such a rich experience on the ground in Afghanistan, and you know the context so well, that we are so grateful for your unfailing efforts, and also a reassuring and acknowledgement that today that you have been giving us, and also your efforts at the United Nations for giving a seat for the Afghan women to be present in these important discussions about their future and the activities, and to be heard and amplifying our voice and be the voice of us who we don't have access to independent media, as was mentioned by our colleague earlier. So you are our voice right now, and also thankful for everything that you are doing for Afghan women and Afghanistan at the moment. With that, we were moving also to Ms. Melissa Afridi. I believe you had a question, and also any final remarks from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been so incredible. Probably the best hour and a half I've spent in a long time. Incredibly insightful, inspiring, and it's just amazing to be here with all of you. And of course, Richard, who is our strongest partner really in this effort for the working group. One question I wanted to ask before we leave also to really get a sense of course, the challenges are immense, and you have very helpfully pointed out some of the specific operational challenges and gaps. What I would like to know is there anything that is actually working? Anything that is showing results, or that you think you need to be able to do more of, as we think about how we can support your efforts? We've heard a lot about the challenges, but what's actually working? Is there anything we can build on, so that when we have our conversations with different stakeholders as well as donors, we can also articulate where the focus needs to be? So if you have any specific thoughts, that would be really helpful.
I believe we can go to Ms. Susan Tahmasi Tahmasabi, sorry for the pronunciation, to answer this question and also elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, what I think one thing that really is working is that these women's groups, even though they consistently talk about the support they need, and they are nascent groups, and they do need support to develop into stronger groups. But one way that they are working is that they are actually organized in the same exact way that they need to be organized to work in these repressive contexts, as fluid initiatives that aren't registered. It's they're grassroots. They're responding very much to needs on the ground, and they are agile, able to move quickly to address needs. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that Femina and Freedom Now together are planning to do a report interviewing several of these initiatives that our colleague Zobeida at Freedom Now has identified many of them, to find out more specifically both about their challenges and what it is that they're doing that's good. Another thing that I really wanted to point to that we keep hearing about is support for digital security training, and then also psychosocial support. So I'm going to put that out there, because I don't think anyone really talked about the psychosocial support, but this is absolutely critical, because we need to maintain the mental health and well-being of women human rights defenders on the ground that are working in such difficult contexts, so that they can continue to do that. But please look forward to our report. I don't promise that'll happen in the next month, in the next few months, and we will be in touch with your offices with the results of that. Sorry to interject, but I wanted to put in that marker. Thank you. And really thank you everyone, and for being so patient with us at the beginning when we had technical issues.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that. And we really have to apologize from you, Ms. Fatima Ahmadi, because we are already running late. So we have to finish the event in favor of our panelists and also the audience. So I just wanted to restate some of the important messages that we hear from our panelists tonight. So the international donor organizations should acknowledge the limitation of the grassroots movements for not being able to comply with donors' requirement under the conditions and that they operate, lacking a formal structure and also legal and institutional backing. At the same time, it is this lack of formality that gives them the advantage that they can operate in this repressive context, and should provide them with the vital support for their sustenance to continue the important work that they do, and especially providing us with the first-hand news of what's happening in Afghanistan in the absence of an independent media or news outlet, and should provide them with the vital support and for them to be able to continue their important work. As Ms. Susan mentioned, that we will be sharing the recording of and the brief of the event will be followed for the audience as well, to compensate for the technical issues that we had at the beginning, and also in case we will have more interest from the audience to listen some of the important remarks that were actually presented by our two special rapporteurs of the United Nations, and as well as the grassroots activists who were present today from Afghanistan. So with that, we would like to thank you once again for your time, consideration, and effort to attend the meeting today. It was extremely important to hear about the grassroots movements in Afghanistan, as well as what is happening internationally at the United Nations right now. So we are really grateful for every one of our speakers and also the attendees, and also for the three organizations who managed to arrange these important discussions and providing platform for the Afghan women coming from Afghanistan to state their concerns, as well as their needs and demands, and also for the two important special rapporteurs of the United Nations to state the support that we and the discussions at the international level. So thank you very much.